Well, welcome, Doug, to the Mákook Sélim podcast series for the launch of issue number 3 in June 2022. Wonderful to have you here and to have Fortis's continued support for the magazine. I'd like to just welcome you here, Doug Slater, who's the Vice President of External Indigenous Relations at FortisBC.
Thank you very much, Chastity. It's great to be here today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our discussion today. And I understand that FortisBC has been operating in the field of Indigenous relations for some time now and have initiated a bunch of initiatives in regards to truth and reconciliation. So I'm wondering if you would just like to generally open with giving an overview of Fortis's commitment to truth and reconciliation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chastity. At FortisBC, we are, very committed to reconciliation, and we've been, our journey has been one that's, spanned a couple of decades. We've, I think, because we serve 58 Indigenous communities, and we have infrastructure that crosses about 150 different traditional territories in BC. We've been very close to communities and to the need for reconciliation. And so as an organization, FortisBC has been very committed over time. And our journey started, like I said, a couple of decades ago with us forming our statement of Indigenous principles to try to inform our actions and our words and going forward about how we're going to, commit to growing the inclusion of Indigenous people in our business and, driving meaningful relationships and respect.
That's wonderful. I wonder if you can just share a little bit more about your statement of Indigenous relations at Fortis and just maybe some of the key elements of what that includes.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So just a bit of background, we first created our statement of Indigenous principles back in 2001. And we did that with the help of Indigenous thought leaders. Really important to build Indigenous perspective into the things that we're doing. And this statement of Indigenous principles for Fortis outlines our commitment to building effective Indigenous relationships and ensuring that we have, as an organization, put in place all of the structures, the resources, and the skills in order to, maintain those relationships and carry out the things that we have committed to. And so our statement, covers the areas of, Fortis's commitment to acknowledging and respecting Indigenous peoples, their unique histories, cultures, protocols, values and beliefs. It talks about, Fortis's commitment to supporting fair and equal access to employment and business opportunities. It talks about, attracting Indigenous employees, consultants, and contractors to come work with us and to form business partnerships. And of course, it talks about our commitment to open dialogue and clear and open communications, rather. Really our interest in mutual benefit for both parties. So it's a really, I would say it's a great document. It's high level, and it really helps our employees connect with and understand our commitment as an organization, and then bring life to that and carry it out in their day-to-day work.
That's wonderful to hear that the statement was developed so long ago, like a couple of decades ago now. And since then, as you know, the 94 calls to action were released in 2015 in partnership with the Truth and Reconciliation Report. And so I'm interested in how is FortisBC specifically implementing call to action number 92 beyond, or maybe not beyond your statement of Indigenous peoples, but maybe it goes deeper into that if you want to speak to that? And what are the initiatives that are in response to call to action number 92 that you're actioning?
Yeah, great question. So, really I'll kind of break it up into three main things. And, the first one being, building those relationships, seeking the free and prior informed consent of Indigenous peoples before, proceeding with projects. The second one being, the jobs, training, access to education opportunities, and then finally about how we educate our staff. And so, this is an area we've been very active in. And, for example, working with so many communities, I know I talked about our statement of Indigenous principles, but we've been working to through our leadership actions, business development, employment, and community relations to really build, to carry out our response and give the TRC 92 action here at FortisBC. And so I'll give some examples. We have on the equitable access to jobs, training, and education. We have undertaken a number of things, but I would say with our major projects, really kind of focused on bringing Indigenous inclusion and involvement into our projects. And, one of the projects that we have that I'd like to talk about is our inland gas upgrades project. And, when we started that project, it's a 5-year project. It's located primarily in the interior of the province across just a number of communities. And through that project, we're, taking a bit different approach than we have in the past, and really trying to work directly with communities and explain the type of work that we have, understand what Indigenous businesses are available, and then connecting those with the opportunities. And we've had some really great success doing that. We're in our 3rd year of that project, and we've been able to grow Indigenous inclusion on the project fairly significantly. In 2021, I think of our local expenditures on the project, we were close to about a third of the expenditures being with the Indigenous communities that we're working with, which is excellent. So it's through our approach to projects that we're bringing access to employment on that same project. Just to kind of touch on training for a moment, we're also trying to work more directly with with all the companies that we're working with to try to build Indigenous inclusion plans when they're contracting for work with us. And so that's helped drive those outcomes. In terms of the training part, I'll give an example. We have, we need for the project, we need help in the safety area, where we need companies to come on site and to help us manage the safety of our work site. And so these are great opportunities to take the safety company and see if we can't create an internship, which we've done with the IGU project, where we can bring on an intern from the local Indigenous community. We did this with a member of the Ktunaxa Nation, where the individual came on, got their safety training on the project. They're left, once the project is complete, of course, they have that, and now they can go and use that in different places to work. That's the kind of experience otherwise might have had to go to, say, Northern Alberta or somewhere else to get. So we're really proud of those types of opportunities to leave behind that training and education. I'll just touch on next the education and management of staff. This is an area where we've been really busy. We've instituted here Indigenous awareness training. We developed that training with input from Indigenous thought leaders. So far, happy to report that about 60% of our employees have undergone that training, and we've embedded in our performance metrics, at least for 2022 here, that we'd like to get 85% of the people through there, and then 2023 we'll look at the remainder. That training is really helping share share information about raising Indigenous awareness, raising understanding of culture, of histories, and helping our employees gain a better understanding of all those things. On the the consultation, building relationships, part of TRC 92. We've built a pretty big team now. We're about between 40 and 50 employees that are working in this space. Working with all those 58 communities in 150 different nations whose territories we cross. As we conduct our work, we've adapted our approach to to really kind of start earlier in the process and be going to the nations with early engagement. And so I think I'll leave it there, but suffice to say a lot of work going on those.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of the initiatives that you're actioning in regards to call to action number 92. It does demonstrate the depth at which Fortis has been working in this space over a couple of decades. Quite often, recently, companies are wanting to be a part of the truth and reconciliation movement, but don't really know how to go about that. There's that sort of corporate will to want to join the movement and respond to call to action number 92. So you've given a lot of wonderful examples of where companies can start and also dig deep into. You talked a little bit about procurement as well, and ensuring that Indigenous communities have opportunities to be a part of your longer term projects and short term projects. So I'm interested if you wanted to add anything to talking about your Indigenous procurement strategy, and maybe what the response has been at the Indigenous community level.
So this is something we're continuing to work on. I talked a little bit about our experience with major projects, and I think our success with major projects like that inland gas upgrades project I spoke to have really paved the way for us to look deeper into our organization and start to evolve our processes to build greater inclusion. And so we've been working on a supply chain strategy that really starts at the front end. It starts with engaging with Indigenous businesses in the areas that we're doing work to, help build an understanding of what work is coming, and also getting an understanding of what businesses are there and how they can help us. The strategy is also about trying to get some of those businesses registered or in some cases pre-qualified to really take any barriers out of the way, so that when the work is available, we know who to reach out to, we know who to send our request for proposals to, and can build in get more Indigenous businesses working with FortisBC. We've also kind of gone to the lengths of looking at how we're selecting companies and trying to redesign that so that we can ensure that we're having those positive outcomes of actually getting Indigenous businesses to come and work with us. And then finally, the at the tail end of it, I think it's really about understanding and measuring, putting in place measurements so that we can look back and say, how have we done? What do we need to change, and how can we evolve? And so that work we're just kind of concluding on. Really excited to kind of bring that strategy into play, and I think it's really going to help us drive even greater inclusion in parts of the business, outside of our major projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's encouraging to hear that you're measuring your success. As I think there's like a saying that says, if what gets measured, like gets done.
Yeah.
And so it sort of again shows the level of commitment from Fortis in regards to this space. I have heard that you do have a Fortis employee circle that was developed for Indigenous employees, and non-Indigenous employees are welcome as well to learn from each other. And I'm interested to hear a little bit more about that, and how the idea came about, and sort of what the objectives are of that employee circle.
Yeah, so the Indigenous Employee Circle is something that we launched last year in 2021, and it is open to both Indigenous and non-Indigenous employees. It's grown actually now to about 80 members from a variety of departments. And the circle is comprised of employees. They meet monthly with the intent of building connections with others in the business, to learn and grow from the presenters who are Indigenous thought leaders, like we had recently in Dr. Christopher Horsthy from the Tanaha Nation. We also had the organizers of the Moosehide campaign who presented, and that's a really important initiative that we're supporting at FortisBC. This is to help provide that environment to staff to learn and grow and share together, and kind of fits with FortisBC. We have a culture of belonging here to try to create an environment where everyone can bring their full selves to work and to support our employees. And I would say so far, staff have really appreciated this opportunity, to have access to initiatives like this within the workplace. So it's been positive, and we continue to evolve as we move forward. And it's maybe just another way that we're supporting reconciliation here, creating a more inclusive environment, as I said, about our culture of belonging for staff to have a healthy culture for knowledge sharing and problem solving at the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing about that. I think that it's important for companies to understand that in a part of the recruitment and retention strategy is for Indigenous peoples and I guess Indigenous employees to feel like they belong, and that there's a safe space for them to connect with other Indigenous and non-Indigenous employees. So thank you
Mm-hmm.
for sharing about that. I'm curious that I know that Fortis has been operating in this space for, a little over 20 years. And I remember about 15 years ago meeting Bruce Falstad, and he, was leading the charge for Fortis, and had been for a while in regards to Indigenous relations. And you mentioned that you've grown to like about 50 or 60 employees in this space. And so I'm just interested in sort of, what influenced that growth over time.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Bruce Falstead. Shout out to Bruce. He was, really a pioneer and a leader here at FortisBC, and helped shape a lot of those early things that I talked about earlier. So, really can't say enough good things about him. Just in terms of, why we've grown, how we've grown in this area, I really think it's about Fortis rising to the challenge of reconciliation and recognizing the importance of Indigenous perspectives, Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous people having a say in the projects in place, in the territories and where they're affected. And so, FortisBC owns long-lived infrastructure. It's across the land base. And so it's no surprise that, we've had to really kind of evolve maybe more quickly than other organizations. I'm sure there's some, others are doing the same as us, but I think that's helped us along our journey. But also through the leadership of, at FortisBC here, but some of the pioneers like Bruce Falstead that have helped, shape change here. And I talked about earlier our statement of Indigenous principles, and right in the top of that is about making sure we have the resources, the people to carry out and maintain those relationships. And I think part of that growth is really about making sure we have the people to maintain those relationships. We're spread all across BC, so it's no surprise we need a fairly big team in order to do that. And relationship, getting away from maybe a more transactional relationship to a long, meaningful, lasting relationship is about showing up, and we need the people to do that. And so that's why we've built that team.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned a really interesting point about moving from transactional relationship to longer term, building those longer term relationships and needing the resources to do that. And I'm just interested to hear from you, like what's some of the feedback from the Indigenous communities that you've been working with about just Fortis deepening its commitment to truth and reconciliation?
Well, it's probably no surprise that having a commitment like we do to to action around truth and reconciliation is welcome news to the communities that we work with. And so we've had good feedback around that, and I think it's really about in working with the nations is really about I mentioned it earlier about showing up and being there, and kind of investing in that relationship and taking a relationship first approach. Probably the best success we have is where we have that kind of open, continuous dialogue where we're hearing from those the communities, what's going on there, we understand, and and there's ways that we are helping, which builds a really harmonious and long-term relationship. So I think the key part of reconciliation is the action part. And so the best feedback we get is where we're actually taking action in a community. I talked about the IGU project and the training, the employment, and the amount of Indigenous businesses. That is really, really positive stuff, and it really helps us form deep relationships. And when the next project comes around, we're already ahead of the game, and we can demonstrate what we can do. So I think it's the action part. I'd summarize that and say it's about the action at the end of the day.
Agreed. So what would your advice be if to a corporation of similar size, or any corporation really, if they wanted to start making a commitment to truth and reconciliation in a more meaningful way? What would your advice be to the corporations within British Columbia?
I think there's three things that I would say. First is you got to start on your journey somewhere, and it is a journey. Reconciliation is one of those immeasurable goals where you got to be actively moving towards it, but it's a long process, and you have to start. So it's a journey. Get started is the first piece. The second piece is, I think, advancing reconciliation and taking action is about building capacity. Capacity is key, both for the organization and for the communities. And, internally, we're building capacity through things like our Indigenous awareness training. We're helping our employees understand Indigenous perspectives and histories and culture. And it's so important for when they're out doing their work and they're thinking about also what their role is and how they can help, that they have that. Capacity is also important in Indigenous communities where, let's just say we're working, with businesses, and we sometimes have to help build that capacity in businesses, and just like the apprenticeship I was talking about, so that it's there next time when you're ready to start your next job. The other thing I would say is that there's you have to have leadership commitment to it as well. It's it's a journey, and not sometimes to solve problems and to keep the momentum up and to have a deep commitment, it takes leadership. And so you really have to commit to it and set the right tone in the organization. And I think those are the three pieces of advice I would give to a company that's looking to start their journey.
That's great advice. Thank you. And I guess just shifting into a more personal question, Doug, and you talk about reconciliation being a journey, and just curious what that journey has been like for you personally as a professional in this space.
Well, I just want to add one thing. I thought of a fourth thing that I just, it was killing me. I really have to add, which is,
go for it.
It is so absolutely important to bring Indigenous perspectives into your organization. And so, we had great leadership, from pioneers like Bruce Falstead. Where we don't have that inside the organization, we're actively seeking it. And I think that is, the thing I would add that is really important.
Thank you.
To get to your question about, how it's been for me, personally, I've been in this role, Chastity, since about August of 2020. And, I accepted this role because it's about making a difference and about doing the right thing. And so it's really rewarding to work in an area where, we know we need to continue to evolve. We have to put the right leadership in place and take action. And so for me, I feel like, I really like my job, and it's rewarding to work with the people and communities and such a talented team that we have here at FortisBC, and to make change. And so I think it's an incredibly positive place to be working.
That's great. And I'm wondering if you can share, one insight that you have gained from like an Indigenous thought leader, or being out in an Indigenous community that was impactful for you.
I think the one thing that left the biggest impression on me is I quickly learned how diverse the perspectives are. We talk about Indigenous peoples writ large a lot of times, but when you really start to work with different communities, it is amazing how diverse the history, the culture, and the perspectives are from community to community. And I think it's always really important to remember, who your audience is, what their perspective is. And that part is, I think that left a big impression on me, just simply because I think, until you're working directly with communities, you don't necessarily get exposed to that, and it is really really interesting.
For sure, I agree. It's like traveling into communities, there's never like the same experience twice, right? So
Yes.
that's what's magical about being in this space. So I just want to provide the opportunity and some space for you to add anything to this incredibly insightful talk about what Fortis is doing around truth and reconciliation. So just want to provide a little bit of space if you'd like to add any final thoughts before we wrap up here.
Yeah, I think for final words, this is a journey, and we're always learning, and we're always improving and evolving. It's not just about, the business part of it. It's about really fundamentally doing the right thing, and, about making this a better place for everybody. I would say that it's not always easy, of course. And, as an organization, you really kind of need to step back and do your homework, understand that diversity in each community, and respect that. And probably most importantly, be prepared to listen and adjust your approach, because when you might come at it, a certain way, but there's always a different perspective, and being open to listening and to doing things differently is what's going to make change. And I think when when I look at like FortisBC and the commitment we have here, this really has made us a stronger and better company. And certainly I would say here there's a lot of pride that we have in working with the communities, and we're really proud that they work with us. And so for me, that's really important. And I'm personally looking forward, and FortisBC is looking forward to developing relationships, especially as we move forward into this clean energy transition. There's lots of opportunity, and looking forward to building stronger and lasting relationships.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Doug, for taking the time to be with us here today. As I mentioned earlier, I've sort of had been tracking FortisBC in the Indigenous relations space for a little over 15 years. And so it's been enlightening for me to learn about the journey that FortisBC has been on in regards to truth and reconciliation and the evolution and the continued commitment. So I know that I speak on all of us here at the Mákook Sélim team at Business in Vancouver. Just want to thank you and raise my hands to you and your team for being with us here today, for your continued support of the work that we're doing. And I look forward to continuing to see all of the initiatives that you roll out with your team. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. That was Doug Slater, Vice President of External Indigenous Relations at FortisBC, and thanks for tuning in with us today.